Okay. We have one of the presenters here. All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order of the House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee. And members, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here. I know it's crazy this afternoon, and everybody's got bills to present. We're getting down to the wire on getting bills out where they can still get through rules. And with that, we had out of the Energy Subcommittee, we had House Bill 243 presented to us by Chairman Dollar the other day, and we didn't take a vote on it. We're still in the committee, and we're getting ready to take that up. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this bill, by the way. It's been heard. Actually, we've been talking about this bill for over a year, and so we want to go ahead and take it up. And Chairman Hawkins.
Chairman and committee, this is now known as Fiber Light. This bill has been sawed on, and there's not much left to it. Turn your attention to line 16 and line 22. The changes are it just refers to subparagraph B, which is on the second page. And here's the guts left in the bill, and it says if a telephone company does not have a retail end user located within the boundaries of a municipal authority, but does occupy public rights of way within the boundaries of that municipal authority with one or more small cell facilities that produce actual recurring revenues for telecommunication services provided by the telephone company, then due compensation for the use of the right-of-way for the fiber optic cable owned by the shall be 3%. And that's it. And the rest of the page really just refers to the equipment that they use, which is really no change.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee? Number 23. Yes,
of course.
Hi, Representative Hawkins.
Yeah.
I hope you know I've really enjoyed going through this bill with you.
I know you have.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you have a question.
Yeah. Oh, don't be surprised, sir.
Yeah, it's okay.
So I really appreciate the work that you guys have done on this, and heeded our concerns, my concerns about the bill. The only final concern that I do have is, I was in support of HB 184, which was the small cell bill. In fact, I think it passed out of the House almost unanimously. Mm-hmm. It was a bill that was negotiated over the course of 8 or 9 months between GMA and the telecom companies, and I'm personally very excited about that for our cities. My final concern is, my question to you is, are you concerned at all that this bill may conflict with or subvert the hard work that went into HB 184?
Not at this time and not at this point. We have a very nice procedure in this House and on the Senate side where things get merged.
Okay. Well, thank you. I would still like to posit that I think it would be best to wait until the fate of HB 184 is decided and it goes into effect, and maybe revisit this next year.
Okay. 184, is that the CST?
That's a small cell bill.
Oh, okay. Well, it's going to go. I can tell you that.
Believe him.
17, Representative Jackson? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm still perplexed on retail versus wholesale. So the company, Crown
Castle, yes.
Crown Castle will pay wholesale, correct?
We will pay 3% of the recurring revenues that we receive in a jurisdiction.
Which is wholesale. It's not retail.
Are you asking the services we provide?
Correct.
That is correct. We provide service to other companies.
So the question is, what are others who are operating in that same space? They're paying retail, correct? Like Comcast, AT&T.
So we're a little unique in that we are the only ones who have historically paid 3% for our fiber and the nodes. I can't speak to what AT&T is paying because I don't know what they pay on their wireless services. Comcast typically pays a 5% franchise fee, and that's based on their video product, but this is a broadband product.
Right, no, I understand.
Okay.
So walk me through this scenario. Let's say I am Comcast
Okay.
and I don't want to pay retail. I want to pay wholesale. So I'm going to outsource to you. Can I do that in this bill?
Comcast does not pay any fees under 46-5-1.
Yeah, if I may, Comcast has nothing, it's
no.
a totally different animal in this.
Okay,
don't-
well,
they're
let
not,
me-
they operate completely different. They pay the right now they're paying the 3%. But
Right.
they're probably gonna be changed, but
So-
right now they pay, they're not in the same category as these people.
Okay, I understand, Mr. Chair. So let me change. I don't want to use Comcast. Let's say I'm Apple or Google. Pick a company. Can they outsource to you with this bill?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Can another company outsource to your company? Let's say, for example, I'm company A.
Okay.
I'm company A. I'm not affiliated with you, but you're paying at a lesser rate. And I want to be able to get my services in a particular community or city or county. Can I outsource to you as a subcontractor?
So this bill doesn't allow or disallow companies to operate how they otherwise would. What it does is this is about the due compensation that we pay to cities. So historically, we've been paying 3% of our recurring revenue. And what's going on is we have a consultant that is telling cities that they could charge up to $5,000. And what this bill is attempting to do is close the loophole so that we continue to pay 3% on the recurring revenues.
Okay.
So we have recurring revenues in a jurisdiction, and we want to continue to pay 3% on those recurring revenues.
Okay. If I may follow up, Mr. Chair, what would this bill do for home rule? Will the mayors of those cities or municipalities, how will they perceive this bill? Would they perceive this bill as favorable or unfavorable?
I don't know how to answer that question. That may be a question for the cities.
Okay. All right.
I can answer for Gainesville. I've talked to our mayor, and he is fine with charging just what it costs the company to provide the service. He said they're not in the business of trying to make money. They're in the business of trying to provide services. So the more people charge companies like this or broadband companies or whoever it may be, that charge is passed on to the end user, which is you and I. So in our city, this is fine. And I think in most cities in this state, this is fine. There's a few that's been charging a little bit more, but.
So if I may, so
Okay,
Mr.
one
Chair.
more. Yeah, one more.
Okay, Mr. Chair. So based on what you just said, I don't live in rural Georgia, but I have family and friends that live in rural Georgia.
Okay.
Will this be a favorable bill for those who live in rural Georgia? Because there will be a cost that would be passed on to them. Will those who reside in rural Georgia see this bill as favorable or unfavorable at the end of the day?
I think at this point, Chairman,
Yeah, if I may,
the chairman
I mean,
of
it's-
this committee knows the answer.
It's not really a cost passed on. It's actually, I mean, they can get revenue from it. I mean, a city can get revenue from this. It's not a cost that's passed on to them because they're not doing anything. I mean, I'm not saying it derogatory. I mean, it's basically using, all this relates to is using right of way, which really doesn't belong to the city anyway. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to the people. But it's a charge that they are getting one way or the other for the use of that right of way. So they're actually getting revenue from it. It's not a cost to the city, whether it's in rural Georgia or urban Georgia. It's not a cost to them. It's actually revenue for them. They would have differing opinions about how much revenue that they should get, but it's not a cost. But thank you for the questions. Very good questions. Let's see. Did you have another question? Yes, ma'am.
Just to answer the gentleman's question, GMA, the Georgia Municipal Association, which is tasked with representing Georgia cities, they are against this bill. You're welcome.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to give the GMA the opportunity, and we've talked about this a lot, obviously, and it's nothing, not trying to limit anybody or anything like that, but we've talked about it a lot, and I want to give you the opportunity, and I think the cable folks wanted to speak also, if I'm not mistaken, so 2 minutes, but just to the point, and we've talked about it, and I appreciate you coming, and would like to hear from you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be brief, even quicker than 2 minutes, because you're right. We've all discussed this a lot. I think this is about the fourth sub before us and the fourth hearing on this. But Charlotte Davis, I represent the Georgia Municipal Association. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on the bill. Right now, as the bill stands, and we did get a new sub this morning, but I believe it is related to just small cell wireless facilities. And we do still have concerns with that, as some have mentioned on your committee. You know, we've worked very hard to pass a small cell bill through the House nearly unanimously, and on the Senate side as well, and look forward to that small cell bill hopefully being signed into law fairly soon. And this would seek, the way that our folks and myself read it, would seek to lower due compensation for the one component that wasn't addressed in that small cell bill, and it also was not addressed in the FCC order, and that's the fiber that leads to the small cell. And so I think that there is a conversation to, by chance, be had by this around this topic, but would at least ask to allow the small cell wireless legislation, which hopefully will become law, to begin work in Georgia to allow small cell nodes to actually be deployed before we start addressing for infrastructure providers, whether it's a single crown castle or the entire infrastructure industry, before we start allowing them to lower their revenue to nodes and small cell facilities that haven't even been deployed yet in our communities. That's just, you know, where we're at with it right now, given the sub that we've seen today. I'd be happy to take any questions, but I appreciate Chairman Parsons working with us on this, and also y'all as a committee looking at it so diligently over the past
Okay.
several days.
All right, we're not going to take questions. We're not going to have questions. I want to want you to give an opportunity to make a presentation, but we're not going to do questions.
Thank you, Mr.
We've
Chairman.
done, I mean, I'm not trying to cut you short or anything, but I think the questions have been pretty much addressed.
Thank you, sir.
But thank you, I appreciate it. Stephen Lofton, I think you wanted to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I
Sure.
appreciate this time. And we have spoken quite a bit about this, so I'll be very, very brief as well. We would agree that, well, first of all, we pay 5% of our retail revenues, not 3%. 3% of wholesale is clearly a discount to get into the right-of-way that could be used to Representative Jackson's example, to get to the right-of-way and get to customers cheaper than we can. So we would like to see the industry and the cities come together, sit down, and have a process much like was done with the small cell bill, where we can all agree, because we would love $100 a mile or a 3% on wholesale. We would enjoy that same opportunity, and we think that would be fair for all involved. I'm sure there's a number that we could get to if we had that opportunity. I do want to point one other issue that we found this morning with the bill, and that is at line 20. This is the paragraph 10 that exempts the Crown Castle and the other companies that would use this from the different permit fees, encroachment fees, degradation fee, et cetera. That's already available to telecom. It would apply it to them as well. And the line that's concerning is at line 20. It's that last piece of the sentence, or any other provision of law, regardless of nomenclature. That to us seems very broad, could potentially upend the small cell permit fee that was put into place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate the presentation.
Can I speak just for a second?
You've got 30 seconds, okay?
Line 20 is already in law. 5%, I believe, is just on their video product,
Okay.
which is not included in this bill. It's just
Okay.
telephone. Thank you.
All right, and with that, you know, what it appears to me is, unless I'm reading this incorrectly, what we're trying to do is bring what a company like Crown Castle, a company that does that same service, what they have to pay for the use of the right-of-way is just bringing the wholesale, if they sell it as wholesale, to the same price that's already in code if they sell it as retail. I think that's all it's really doing. I mean, it sounds really complicated, and a lot of people are trying to make it really complicated, but when you get down to it, it's just making the level playing field between the two. With that, I just would run the committee that, first of all, here again, I appreciate everybody being here. What we want to do as a committee is not, try to necessarily pass legislation, kill legislation, but what we do want to do is try to advance telecommunications on this side of it. We also deal with energy. but we want to advance telecommunications and the best telecommunications for the people of the state. That's what we're really about, and we have to review these things carefully. And I respect the views of everybody on the committee. And with that, is there a on this? What's the bill number? Which one's it? I want to make sure I have it right. Okay, House Bill 243, and we're dealing with LC 363927S. And we have a question, but I'm going to go ahead and see if there's a motion, and then we'll have a discussion. Is there a motion on the bill? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the bill. Is there discussion? Looks like there is some discussion. I think 19, who is that? Chairman Martin has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand what we're trying to do. I think what we were trying to do earlier in the week, and I still have concerns. The question I'd ask Chairman Hawkins is the need to, is this definition on line 45 in the bill where we define small cell wireless facility?
Chairman Martin, there's a motion.
Okay, I'll just vote against the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm
That'll
just
be
saying,
fine.
I mean, you can discuss, this
That'll
is
be fine.
discussion, but I don't think we need to get back and asking questions of the author at this point.
Okay, well, I'd ask the chair then. Is on line 45, we have a redefinition of small cell wireless device. I've already had one of these small cell bills come on the floor without having the opportunity to understand it fully, and I'm not going to do that again. Is this new definition of the term small wireless facility different than we passed in 184?
What lines are you looking at?
Line 45.
45. Chairman Martin, it appears to me, and here again, I don't have the other, but it appears to me it's exactly the same language that we've used before in definition. We've talked about the small cell now for, this is the second year. It appears to me it's the same language. Now, I can't say for a fact because I don't have the other in front of me.
It's the same one in
The small cell bill, yes.
okay. So why wouldn't we refer to that definition rather than putting it in again?
Well, it's not, that bill hasn't passed, for one thing. It's not in code yet. Anything else, Chairman Martin?
No,
Okay,
good.
thank you. I mean, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your expertise. I really do, and not trying to, but I just think this is time for discussion. And 23, is that Representative? Did you have a question?
More, yeah, just a parliamentary inquiry,
Yes,
Chairman.
yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if we could take the time to continue to, look into this bill and vote on it next week.
No, there is no time, actually. As you know, to try to answer your parliamentary question, next Thursday, a week from today, we'll probably be right over there in the chamber at this time. We'll probably still be there for several hours, but that will be the crossover day. I wish it wasn't. I wish that we never changed. I mean, my opinion, I wish crossover day was still day 33 like it was when I first got here. Or even 30 later on, but 28, in my opinion, is way too early, but it is what it is. But that's the crossover day. We're not in on Wednesday, and any legislation, and you got to take in consideration, it has to be, any bill has to be submitted in for rules, and there's a process there. I mean, I think this is your first year. You'll see that strange things happen those last couple of days with bills, and you wonder how they got through. Maybe your bill didn't get through, but no, it's getting down to the wire. I mean, it really is, and that's just the fact.
Can I just say a word?
15 seconds.
Yeah, to Representative Martin, when I spoke with Legislative Council this morning, your concern, starting with 45, she addressed that with me and said she picked up language from other portions of code and put it in this bill, so it mirrors that, and this applies to the subject matter in this bill, which is small cell.
Okay. Now, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, okay, looks like somebody hit it just in the nick of time. Who's at number 26?
Mr. Chairman, just a question. I understand that Ways and Means may be considering another piece of legislation regarding these fees that treats everyone the same, or are we aware of that?
Yeah, I'm very aware. I just came from Ways and Means, and we were actually had that bill up over there, and I had some comments myself on that bill. And here again, it's a piece of legislation that, you know, is in play, but it's not passed yet. I don't know I don't think it would really, I don't believe it would actually, have any impact this right here, though. I may be mistaken. I'm not an attorney, but I don't think it impacts this. But thank you for the question, comment. All right, with that, we have a motion, we have a second. If all in favor would raise your hand to signify that you're in agreement with the, passing this bill as is, with a do pass recommendation. All in favor of this legislation, please raise your hand, signify by raising your hand. Okay, doesn't look good for the passage of the bill. Okay, and, but we'll go ahead and do it, the whole thing. All opposed, raise your hand. Okay, this bill, having failed to get a majority vote in the committee, fails. But thank you for your time, and thank you for all the effort you put into it. Thank you. And if you'll bear with us just for a minute, I think we have a sub coming on the other. We got one other bill. One other bill to take up. It's a pretty important bill, I believe. So if you just hold on with us. Just bear with us for a few minutes till we get this sub in here, and this is the last bill we have coming up. go ahead. I think we're about ready to get started here. We have House Bill 499, a substitute. We're working with a substitute to House Bill 499, a committee substitute. House Bill 499, LC 36392-6S. And recognize Representative Kelly to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could, I'd go in and like to ask Jason Bragg with Georgia EMCs, as well as I think one of his attorneys here to come up as well. Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief in my description. I know the hour's getting late, and this committee's already been working hard today. What House Bill 499 does is simple. It builds upon the efforts already made by this House and this legislative body to expand rural broadband to some of the communities across our state that need it most. We know, Mr. Chairman, that having access to high-speed internet today is just as important as having access to electricity was back in the earliest parts of the 20th century. Children today are forced to do their homework inside a fast food restaurant. We struggle with telemedicine. We struggle with economic development in rural Georgia, and we need to get broadband to the rural parts of our state. What House Bill 499 does is makes clear that where our EMCs have electric easements, where they run their electrical wires across individuals' properties, that they also have the ability now to run fiber, the broadband fiber across those wires as well, Mr. Chairman, without opening themselves up to any exposure for liability's sake. It's a simple bill, Mr. Chairman. There may be questions of Mr. Bragg and his attorney to help us answer them if we have any. I'll do my best and have them as well.
Okay. Thank you. I guess we'll go ahead and go to Jason Bragg, the attorney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Jason Bragg, Vice President of Government Relations with Georgia EMC. And with me, I've got Steve Miner, who is our General Counsel for Georgia EMC, to answer some any questions that may be of more technical nature. But thank you for allowing us to hear the bill today, and thank you for Representative for Whip Kelly for bringing House Bill 499. As most of you know, we represent Georgia's 41 electric membership cooperatives throughout the state, serving about half the state with electricity, about 73% of the land mass, and we're in 157 of 159 counties. So thank you all for having us this afternoon. What HB 499 seeks to do is simply to remove barriers to rural broadband, essentially allowing us to by essentially modernizing the use of our current existing electric easements. This would allow, as Representative Kelly pointed out, our existing easements that may be for only electric use, to allow those to be used for broadband use as well. As times have changed, and this is, as I said, this is simply a modernization of use. As times have changed, many of our co-ops around the country, around the state, have fiber on their systems that exist currently. That fiber is used, in many cases, primarily for electric use. Systems talking to each other, transmitting data back and forth through our lines about our electric system. However, with those fiber, and as you've probably learned from being on this committee and dealing with rural broadband and other issues, there's excess capacity on a lot of that fiber that can be leveraged and utilized by either a third party, whether that be a telecom cable provider or some other communications provider that could leverage that and utilize that excess capacity. Or in the case of what we've been contemplating really for the last 2 years, possibly allowing an EMC itself or an EMC affiliate to get into the direct provider business of broadband services. One thing that this bill does not do, it does not expand the size of our easements. So this does not, this is not going to make an easement that exists on somebody's property right now. This isn't going, you can't go in and make it wider. They can't go in and set an extra pole without the permission of the landowner. Just simply says that easement that's there for electric use, to modernize the use of it and say that we can also use it for broadband services. Arkansas, Tennessee, Indiana, and Missouri have all passed laws dealing with this, and Mississippi actually passed passed a version of this bill dealing with modernization of use of electric easements earlier, back into the beginning of February. So, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions, and happy to answer any questions from the committee, and I appreciate the committee's time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
You want to say something?
I was just gonna add, I mentioned on the fact that, that it would, make clear that adding to these existing electric easements would not expose them to any additional liability. The reason for the sub before you is it makes some changes at some of the various legal organizations that have concerns about that issue, such as the trial lawyers had, and, I appreciate us all working together for the good of rural Georgians.
Any questions from members of the committee? I wanted to ask, I'd read through it quickly.
Sure.
But now, as far as this would allow those easements to be used for the fiber, is that what it's limited to or not?
It's not just limited to fiber. It could be used for really, I think fiber is primarily where I would think it would be utilized, and Steve can probably speak to that more. But I think fiber primarily, but I think it could be really any broadband use.
Yes, sir. The permitted use is broadband services. So
Okay.
any facility, as long as it doesn't create another touching of the ground, no additional poles, things
Right.
like that, any broadband facilities can now be placed in the electric use.
And y'all could lease that out to other companies, is that correct? Under the, I don't know if it seemed like there was something in there about that.
The poles could still be utilized. For example, if the EMC is not a broadband provider, those poles could be utilized by another broadband provider without having to go and try to get an easement specific for communications or broadband services.
Okay, well, I would have to ask you this then, as far as another provider, say that there's someplace, there probably are, for different reasons, that you all decide, and any EMC decides that they don't want to proceed with providing broadband in an area, and another provider wants to use the facilities that y'all have there, including maybe the dark fiber or whatever, I guess y'all could charge any price you wanted to, couldn't you? To that other party?
Well,
Well, in terms of dark fiber, theoretically, yes. I know that typically, in utilizing the EMC, the EMC's dark fiber that we utilize for electric space, the access capacity that that we'd use for electric, that could be used for broadband. I would say that there's some ones that are currently doing that now with some telephone cooperatives in South Georgia, and we. There's different kind of arrangements that can be made depending on, you could condition, theoretically an EMC could say, could put a condition on it saying that if a provider came and wanted to serve everybody in a service territory or in a designated geographic area, we could give you a discount, but theoretically, yeah, we could do really whatever we want. We could charge free, we could charge whatever.
Well, I wanted to ask you too, I think we have another question, but this bill came up fairly late it's really not late in the session, but it's here again related to this crossover day. It's getting on up there, but is this necessary to be, is this necessary in order for the EMCs to do what was provided for in the bill that we passed out of the House back a few weeks ago?
Necessary. Necessary. Yes. I would say it certainly helps remove a legal cloud that could be over some EMCs that could be contemplating how they want to engage in the broadband business.
yes, and Mr. Chairman, one of the main reasons this came up was there was a case in Missouri where the same thing was done.
Okay.
Broadband facilities were installed in a transmission easement, electric transmission easement, and landowners took a class action lawsuit, and in the first case, they had a verdict of $79 million. It was overturned on appeal, and when it was tried again with the original case was overturned based on the measure of damages that were allowed, and the second trial, everybody thought would have a reduced verdict, if anything, and the verdict was $130 million. The judge, on his own initiative, threw the verdict out, and ultimately the case was resolved by agreement of the parties. But that made it clear that this could be a significant impediment to people utilizing their existing easements.
And to piggyback on what Steve said about Missouri, Missouri's legislature went and fixed that law about the year after all of that got settled. So
Yeah, Georgia's among 8 states, I think, that have the current law that could result in that type of verdict.
Anything else you want to add? I know we have some other folks that can want to speak on it, so. I mean, I can come back to you, come back to Representative Kelly, he's the author of the bill, but if there's anything else, I don't see any other questions right now. Oh, there is one. Number 12 and 11.
Okay, my light didn't light up, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The question I wanted to ask, 12. It was? Okay, the question I wanted to ask was the same question you kind of asked. Was there be any compensation that any other company would have to pay to use these lines if they decided they wanted to come in and use the lines for some reason?
I mean,
Say, for example, TIA, another company. You know, you already have your lines down and they decide they want to come in for some reason. You couldn't provide the service, but they could. You know, like he said, what would be the charge? Would there be any compensation?
I don't know the charge. I mean, you would assuming that kind of situation, set up a lease, swap. You know, depending on what the conditions that you put on the depending on what conditions you could potentially place on a provider. You know, theoretically, you could give it for free if they choose to serve an entire area. There's a wide range of options that could be on the table.
Okay, but you could do it for free, or you can do it for $5,000, right?
I don't know how much, you know, a strand of fiber costs to lease off the top of my head. So I could probably get you that answer from someone, but.
Okay.
I think the bottom line is the bill does permit the owner of the utility where the attachments would be made, the owner of those facilities to impose a charge. It doesn't mandate what the charge would be, and like most private property owners, you would think the agreement of the parties would typically prevail, although as a utility there are limitations in federal law, antitrust law, and you know they cannot unreasonably prevent people from utilizing those resources.
Can I answer your question?
It does, but
Okay.
it leaves some ambiguities too.
Okay. Representative Frazier, you had a question, I believe. Oh, that was your, okay. Well, that took care of two. Any other questions of these gentlemen here? We got a couple, looks like. Representative Moore?
Hi. So I'm glad you guys amended some of the language around liability, because when I saw the first draft, that was my immediate concern. It looks like on lines 33 and 34, the language was amended to say, you know, to skip to the key phrase, without incurring liability to the owner or occupant of the real property. Now, of course, I read that as, you know, you changed that so that, to make it clear that you're not extending additional liability to the owner of the easement to protect the property owner. But my question is, you know, how does this impact the possibility of injury to the property owner? You know, for example, in the instance of a faulty installation, you know, and the property owner incurs some kind of damage or injury, how are they protected in that instance?
Yeah, thank you. The intent is that it only, the limitation of liability only applies to the actions relating to putting in the broadband facility. So it's a property question, not a liability question as far as, you know, if they committed a tort, that they would still be subject to liability for those torts, just not for the fact that they installed broadband facilities in the easement.
Okay. And is what you just described further iterated somewhere else in the language here, or in that code section? I guess I'm wondering if we can add clarification to make what you just said much clearer in this bill, unless it's already there.
Well, I in my opinion, it is there. Okay. In line 32 through 34, it says, you know, that they can use an electric easement to install, maintain, lease, and operate broadband services. So those are the only actions for which the liability is limited. So.
Right, and so my question was with regard to, what about if there's a faulty installation?
So maybe I can
please.
jump in here, Representative. As the language, as you look on the original 499 was drawn up, I had some of those same concerns. Bill Clark and some of the trial lawyers had the same concerns. They said, we want to make sure that if there's problems that deal with, if one of the poles falls or something lands on someone, if it destroys any of the property in some way. And so what we tried to limit here to is limited specifically to the electric easement or the paying of additional compensation to the owner. That's where, because the lawsuit that we saw out of Missouri dealt with not providing additional compensation for installing the broadband facilities on there, not anything to do with any actual damages to the real property or damage to anyone to the person. And so that's why we said specifically subject to the electric easement and the language that was agreed upon in the electric easement, and the and any paying or non-payment of additional compensation. If that, hopefully that cleared up maybe a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of subject tos, so thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
All right, very good. Representative Jackson, you had a question, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just going to add, I think the other point of clarity to the gentle lady's point, they will have to be in compliance with the FCC, right? And so it's not like the EMCs could charge some, outrageous costs. Am I correct? I mean, you're this, in terms of the fees and charges, this is written to where you're going to be in compliance with the FCC.
I would just say, Representative
Okay.
Jackson, this bill does not change the rates or the rate schedule or lack thereof that EMCs are required by law through the FCC to charge. This bill is silent on that. That will continue to exist as it does in current law today. What this bill does do is make sure that any charges for or use of the broadband facilities that are installed in question in this legislation today are as affordable as possible, because of the fact that there won't be any additional exposure to increased liability cost. And that's how I would say to it. This language is silent. There are measures that are hopping around the legislature currently today that deal with setting rate schedules for EMCs and other providers. But this bill here is silent on that. We're going to let other legislation deal with that. This is simply dealing with the liability that would come from the EMCs running additional broadband services across those wires. Thank you.
Let's move on. I'm Stephen Lofton. I think you're the only other. We can come back to you, but I think we need to go ahead and kind of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate for this additional opportunity to thank. Thank you, Sean Marie. First off, wanted to thank Majority Whip Kelly. Had some discussions with him earlier today. We agree with you, with the whip, that access to broadband is extremely important for rural Georgia. We agree that barriers, including the costs, should be removed or lowered as well as they can. And just want to start off by saying that we have no issue with most of what is in this bill. No issue with additional access to the easements or anything of that nature. That's all fine. That's good. Issue is let me readjust. We just got a copy of the sub. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. The issue is that it's the last word of line 36 through the end of line 39. Where the EMCs are basically assuring that they can charge whatever fees, they can assess whatever fees and charges they would like. We do find it ironic that as they're seeking to lower their costs for their easements and ensure that they aren't overcharged for those easements by private landowners, that they are at the same time ensuring that they can charge more than we believe they should, and then the FCC believes they should for those for the poles that are in those easements. Frankly, we don't think this language is necessary, and so our recommendation would be to remove it altogether, and that would solve that issue. That would just take it out of the bill. Or at the very least, it should reflect the FCC standards, which were incorporated in House Bill 244, which a number of the members of this committee were sponsors of, including the chairman. Thank you for your time, and certainly glad to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lofton. Anybody have questions? Mr. Lofton? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Representative Kelly, do you want to have any closing statements?
I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, that there are competing bills that I know people are working on trying to get resolution on that matter. No one from the outside of the EMCs and the trial lawyers brought me any suggested changes or any language that would deal with this. So I would just ask the committee to support as presented in the sub.
All right. We have here, I don't see any, we do have a light. Question from Representative Chairman Dollar.
As I look over the bill, Chairman, I've noticed that there's not an effective date on the bill. And the author of the bill has a long and documented history of great concern on that matter. I just wanted to make sure that the chairman was okay moving forward as is.
Well, I think we decided it would be effective, so thank you for the question.
I appreciate that, and with this committee's strong passage, Mr. Chairman, I hope to move it through the House and through the Senate, get it signed by Governor Kemp, and have it become effective as known Georgia law on July 1st, where a piece of legislation is silent on the effective date.
All right, and with that, we have a piece of legislation here that it helps to do the things we've been talking about for the last 3 years. I've said everything that I know to say about rural broadband. I really have. I've said everything that I know to say about it and the need for it. And I've been out there myself with study committees, the rural development committees. I've seen these kids that don't have literally have a laptop or a iPad in school, and they have broadband, and then they sent home, and there's no way for them to do any research, to continue to do work that they were doing in school. I've seen it. It's sad. I mean, that's just the education part of it, the economic development aspect of it, and then for me, the health aspect. The promise of telehealth is such a wonderful thing, and these things have to happen. And if we fail to do anything to do that, then I think that we've failed as members of the General Assembly. Now, with having said that, and that wasn't advocating or being against the bill. I'm talking about the issue that we're dealing with here. So, having said that, we have before us committee substitute to House Bill 499. LC 363926S, and what's the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion to pass. We have a second. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of this bill indicate by saying aye. Any opposed by saying no? Okay, this bill passes. Do pass recommendation, and it's eligible to be taken to rules. Thank you.